My husband put me in a coma. I almost let him do it again. I woke up in a hospital bed feeling like I'd taken the longest nap of my life, and my body was punishing me for it. My head throbbed and my bones felt stiff. Then I heard the crying. A man sat beside me with his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking like he'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. I tried to figure out who he was and why he was crying next to me, but that's when the real panic set in. Call me Grace Vanderwall because I don't know my name. It was like someone had taken an eraser to my entire brain and wiped it completely clean. He looked up when I moved and his whole face changed. "Juliet," he whispered, and he grabbed my hand so fast I flinched. His grip was warm and desperate, like he was scared I'd float away if he let go. Oh my God, you're awake. Nurse. Someone. She's awake." His voice cracked on the last word, and I watched tears slide down his cheeks while nurses rushed in, and doctors followed, and everyone talked over each other in that urgent hospital way. But he never let go of my hand. Not once. His name was Dave. He said we were married for 4 years. The doctors told me I'd suffered a traumatic brain injury and had been in a coma for a month. Now I was experiencing amnesia. So basically my brain decided to factory reset itself. Great. Love that for me. Dave stood in the corner the whole time with his arms crossed, watching everything like a bodyguard. Every few minutes he'd cut in with, "Is she okay?" Or, "Does she need a break?" Or, "Can you dim those lights? She's squinting." The nurses kept giving each other these little looks. I couldn't tell if they thought he was sweet or if they wanted him to shut up. Once everyone cleared out, Dave pulled his chair close and took my hand again. "I know this is scary, but I'm here," he said, and his eyes were still red from crying. "Whatever you need, whatever you want to know, I'll tell you everything." He sounded so nice and endearing when he said it, and my heart swelled. This poor guy had been living a nightmare for a month, and here he was, still trying to take care of me. "Okay," I said, trying to smile even though my face felt weird doing it. "Tell me about us." His eyes lit up like I'd just given him permission to talk about his favorite subject. "We met at a grocery store," he said. 4 years ago. We both reached for the last box of strawberries and you told me I could have it if I gave you my number. I thought you were the boldest person I'd ever met." He laughed a little, and I found myself wanting to laugh too, even though I couldn't picture any of it. "What's my favorite color?" I asked. "Blue." "Do I have any siblings?" "One sister, Caroline. You guys are close." He answered everything without pausing, like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to ask him about me. It was actually kind of adorable. A week later, Dave took me home. I reached for my bag and he grabbed it before I could. "Babe, come on," he said with a little grin. "You just woke up from a coma. Let me be useful." I laughed and let him have it because honestly it felt nice to have someone looking out for me. The house was beautiful in that put-together way where everything matches and nothing has dust on it. I walked through the rooms slowly, waiting for something to click. Nothing did. But Dave stayed right beside me the whole time, pointing things out. "That's your reading chair. You fall asleep there like every night. That's the blanket your mom made us. Those are the mugs from our Hawaii trip." Photos were everywhere. Me and Dave on a beach. Me and Dave at Christmas. Me and Dave cutting a wedding cake. The woman in them looked so happy it almost hurt to look at. I picked up a frame and studied her face. My face. "That's Bali," Dave said suddenly right behind me. His hand landed on my lower back and stayed there. "Our honeymoon. You didn't want to leave." I could feel him watching, waiting for some sign that I remembered. I wished I could give him one. "This is really weird," I said, putting the frame down. "Like, I'm looking at my own face and I feel nothing. Is that bad?" "That feels bad." Dave stepped in front of me and grabbed both my hands like we were about to slow dance. "Hey, look at me," he said, and his voice was so soft it almost didn't sound real. "This is a lot. I get it. But we're going to figure this out together, okay? I'm going to help you remember who you are. Who we are." He paused and did this thing where he tilted his head and looked at me like I was something precious. "And if you never remember, that's okay too. I'll just make you fall in love with me all over again." It should have been romantic. It was romantic, probably. A devoted husband promising to help his broken wife rebuild her entire life. Standing in our beautiful home surrounded by proof that we were happy once. I should have felt lucky. And I did, kind of. I had someone who clearly loved me. Someone who knew everything about my life when I knew nothing. Someone who wasn't giving up on me even though I couldn't remember his face. So why did some tiny part of me feel like holding my breath? I ignored it and chalked it up to the amnesia, the overwhelm, the weirdness of being a stranger in my own body. Dave was being perfect. The house was perfect. My life from what I could see had been perfect. I didn't know yet that perfect was the whole point. I didn't know the old me had been running the night of that accident. I didn't know she'd been running from Dave. And now there I was, back in his arms with no memory of why I'd ever wanted to escape. I'm home now, relearning my life from the only person willing to teach me. But if Dave is really the devoted husband he claims to be, why does everyone who knew me before look at me like they're watching something terrible happen? His mother's coldness, my coworker's fear, the neighbor's whispered question. Something is wrong with this picture. And I'm about to find out that everyone sees it but me. Dave's mother came over for dinner 3 days after I got home, and I'd been nervous about it all morning. Meeting your mother-in-law is already awkward, but meeting her when you can't remember a single conversation you've ever had with her feels like showing up to a final exam for a class you didn't know you were enrolled in. Dave kept telling me to relax. She adores you, he said, while setting the table with the fancy plates I didn't know we owned. You two are super close. She was at the hospital practically every day. Trust me, this is going to be great. I wanted to believe him. I really did. The doorbell rang and Dave squeezed my shoulder before going to answer it. I heard voices in the hallway, his warm and welcoming, hers clipped and short. When she walked into the kitchen, I prepared myself for the emotional reunion Dave had promised. Instead, she stopped about 5 feet away from me and looked me over like she was inspecting a piece of furniture she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. She was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, the kind of person who looked like she had opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to share them. Juliet, she said flatly. Not, oh sweetie, or thank God you're okay, or literally any other warm greeting. Just my name, stated like a fact. She hugged me eventually, but it was the kind of hug you give a distant coworker at a retirement party. Stiff arms, minimal contact, pull away as fast as possible. I tried not to let it bother me because maybe she just wasn't a hugger. Some people aren't. But then Dave went to grab wine from the kitchen, and the second he was out of earshot, she leaned toward me and said, "Well, I'm glad you're finally behaving like a proper wife." I blinked at her. "Sorry, what?" She just smiled this tight little smile and patted my arm. "Nothing, dear. You look well." Then Dave came back and suddenly she was a completely different person. Warm and chatty and asking if she could help with anything. I stood there trying to process what had just happened while she complimented the table settings like she hadn't just said something incredibly weird to me. Finally behaving? What did that even mean? What had I been doing before that was so improper? I wanted to ask, but the moment had passed and Dave was pouring wine and talking about work, and his mother was laughing at his jokes and I felt out of place. I told myself I was overthinking it. She was old. Old people say strange things sometimes. It didn't mean anything. A week later, a woman showed up at our door while I was watching TV in the living room. Dave answered, and I could see the entryway from where I sat on the couch. She was around my age with curly hair, and she was holding a bouquet of sunflowers wrapped in brown paper. "Hi, I'm Becky," she said brightly. "I work with Juliet. Everyone at the office wanted to send something, and I volunteered to drop them off because I live closest, and—" She stopped talking. Just stopped mid-sentence like someone had pressed pause on her. I watched her face change as she looked at Dave. The color drained out of her cheeks so fast I thought she might faint. Her hands started trembling and the flowers shook with them. I didn't know if Dave noticed or not because he kept his voice perfectly calm and friendly when he spoke. "That's so thoughtful. I'll make sure she gets them." But Becky was already backing up. She practically threw the flowers at him and mumbled something I couldn't hear, and then she was gone. Walking so fast to her car she was almost running. I sat up straighter on the couch. "Who was that?" I called out. Dave came into the living room holding the sunflowers like nothing had happened. "Just a coworker of yours," he said with an easy shrug. "Nice that they're thinking of you." He kissed my forehead and took the flowers to find a vase. I kept staring at the front door. Becky hadn't just been uncomfortable. She'd been scared. Legitimately, visibly scared. Of what? Of Dave? That didn't make any sense. He'd been nothing but nice to me. I told myself she was probably just weird around hospitals and sickness. Some people don't handle that stuff well. It didn't mean anything. 2 weeks in, and Dave still came with me everywhere. Grocery store, pharmacy, doctor appointments, everywhere. He said it was because I didn't know my way around yet, and he worried about me getting lost or overwhelmed. It made sense at first, but by now I was starting to feel like I had a very attentive shadow. This particular day, he had a work call he absolutely couldn't miss, so he dropped me off at the grocery store with strict instructions. "Stay inside," he said. "Keep your phone on. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Text me if you need anything." I told him I wasn't 5 years old and he laughed and said he knew, but he couldn't help worrying. Sweet, right? I thought so too. I was standing in the produce section staring at apples and trying to figure out if I liked them when someone appeared beside me. An older woman with graying hair and tired eyes. "Juliet?" she said quietly, and I turned. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" She nodded slowly. "I'm Faith. I live 2 houses down. We used to talk sometimes when you were out in the garden." I smiled apologetically. "I'm so sorry. I was in an accident and my memory—" "I know," she said, cutting me off. She glanced around quickly, nervously, like she was looking for someone. Then she leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume. "Are you okay? Are you safe?" The question hit me like ice water. "What do you mean?" I asked, but she was already stepping back, her eyes fixed on something behind me. I turned around and saw Dave walking through the store entrance, scanning the aisles. When I looked back, Faith was gone, just completely vanished like she'd never been there. Dave found me a minute later. "Making friends?" he asked with a smile. "No," I said. "Just looking at apples." He took my hand and led me toward checkout, and I let him even though he was gripping my hand a little too hard to be normal. But I didn't know what else to do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Dave, listening to him breathe and running through everything in my head. His mother's comment, Becky's terror, Faith's question. 3 different people looking at me like I was standing in a burning building and didn't know it. Then someone called me, but it came from an unknown number. Something told me to answer it, so I did. "Hello?" I whispered. Silence. Then a woman's voice, tight and rushed. "Juliet, it's Caroline. Is he listening?" My heart jumped. It was my sister. "What? No, he's asleep. Caro, don't say my name," she hissed. "Just listen. Are you alone? Are you safe?" That question again. Why does everyone keep asking me that? The line was quiet for a second. Then she exhaled like I'd just confirmed something terrible. "Oh God," she whispered. "You really don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" I asked. "I can't explain over the phone. He tracks everything." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "Start paying attention, Juliet. The things he won't let you see. The rooms he keeps locked. The mail he doesn't let you touch. None of it is what he says it is." I heard something on her end. A door opening. "I have to go. Don't tell him I called." Then the line went dead. I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling while my husband slept beside me. Something was wrong. Something was really, really wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about what Caroline said. The rooms he keeps locked. The mail he doesn't let you touch. I'd spent weeks letting Dave tell me who I was and what my life looked like. I never questioned any of it because I had no reason to. But now I had 4 reasons. 4 people who looked at me like I was in danger. 4 people who knew something I didn't. If Dave was hiding something, it was in this house. And tomorrow, when he left for work, I was going to find it. Dave left for work at 8:15. I watched his car disappear down the street and counted to 60. Then I counted to 60 again. He wasn't coming back. I had maybe 9 hours before he walked through that door, and I needed to use every single one of them. 4 people had looked at me like I was in danger. My own sister had called me in the middle of the night from a blocked number. I was done making excuses. I was done telling myself everyone was just being weird. Today, I was going to find out what the hell was going on in my own house. The basement door was my first stop. I'd walked past it dozens of times since coming home, but Dave was always nearby, always steering me somewhere else before I could think about it too hard. Now I stood in front of it alone and tried the handle. Locked. I jiggled it harder. Still locked. Not stuck. Not jammed. But locked with a key I didn't have. I pressed my ear against the wood and listened. Nothing. Just silence. I made a mental note and moved on. I didn't have time to stand around staring at doors I couldn't open. I moved on. Checked the kitchen drawers, the coat closet, the little desk in the corner of the living room where Dave paid bills. Everything seemed normal. Boring even. I was starting to feel stupid for snooping around my own house like some kind of detective when I remembered my phone. I'd been using it for weeks, but only for basic stuff. Texting Dave, Googling random questions about amnesia. I'd never really looked at it. I pulled it out now and opened the contacts and found it empty. Completely empty. Not a single name, not a single number. Just Dave's contact at the top and nothing else. I scrolled through messages and only found conversations with Dave. Same thing. It was like I didn't exist before the accident. Like I had no friends, no family, no life outside of him. I put the phone down and looked up. That's when I noticed the cameras. They were small black domes tucked into the corners of the ceiling. The more I looked around the house for them, the more I found. One in the living room pointed at the couch where I was sitting. Another in the kitchen. The hallway by the front door. I checked the bedroom and found another one above the dresser angled toward the bed. 4 cameras. Maybe more that I couldn't see. My skin started to crawl. I tried to think of a reason for so many cameras from Dave's perspective. Maybe it was for my safety since I was still getting used to things and he needed the peace of mind. But why would a concerned husband need to watch his wife from 4 different angles? Why did it feel less like protection and more like surveillance? I actually got scared he was watching me at that very moment, so I stopped searching. Then the doorbell rang. My neck snapped towards the door and my heart fell. Dave? No. He had a key he wouldn't ring. I walked to the door slowly and opened it. A mailman stood on the porch holding a stack of envelopes. "Afternoon," he said with a friendly nod. "Got a few for you today." He handed me the mail and I looked down at it. Bills, flyers, and one envelope with my name written on it by hand. There was no return address. Someone had taken the time to write this out and send it to me specifically. Before I could take them, I heard footsteps behind me. Dave had somehow gotten home and got in through the kitchen door. He appeared at my side and took the mail from my hands before I could react. "I got it, babe," he said casually, flipping through the stack. "You don't need to worry about this stuff. It's mostly junk anyway." He barely glanced at the handwritten envelope before tossing it in the trash. "See? Nothing important." He smiled at me and sat down in the living room and patted the spot next to him. I sat down and tried to relax even though I was sweating like crazy and could only think about that letter that had my name on it. Someone had written to me, and he threw it away like it was garbage. I wanted to fish it out, but he was watching me. By night, the trash was gone. That night, Dave took a shower and I moved fast. His nightstand first. Old receipts. A watch he never wore. Nothing. His dresser. Socks and boxers and a broken pair of reading glasses. Nothing. Then I remembered the closet. There was a small lockbox on the top shelf that I'd seen him open once with a key from his wallet. I grabbed a bobby pin from the bathroom and worked at the lock until it clicked open. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. I found tax documents, warranties, an old folder of insurance papers. And at the very bottom, tucked underneath everything else like it was supposed to stay hidden, I found a passport. My passport. I couldn't explain why he had my passport locked up. That was until I flipped it open and scanned the pages and saw it. A visa stamp dated 2 days before my accident. Destination Canada. One way. The shower turned off and I didn't have time to freeze and get scared. I shoved everything back into the box and snapped it shut and barely made it to the bed before Dave walked out with a towel around his waist. "You okay?" he asked, looking at me with his head tilted. "You look pale." "I'm tired," I said, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. He climbed in next to me and pulled me close and kissed my temple and told me to get some rest. I lay there in the dark with his arm draped over me like a chain. One way. I'd been leaving, but not for vacation or work. I was running. I had a plan. I had a ticket. And 2 days later, I ended up in a coma. The old me had tried to escape. Now I needed to figure out what stopped her. The evidence is everywhere once I start looking. My name removed, my escape routes closed, my entire identity filtered through Dave. He hasn't been caring for me. He's been containing me. Somewhere in this house, the woman I used to be left a message. I just have to find it before he realizes I'm looking. The old me knew this moment would come. I just have to trust a stranger who happens to be myself. The old me knew this moment would come. I just had to trust a stranger who happens to be myself. The problem was I had no idea where to start. I'd searched the obvious places already. The drawers, the closets, the lockbox. I'd found the passport, and that was something, but it wasn't enough. It told me I was leaving, but not why. It told me I had a plan, but not what happened to it. If the old me really knew this moment would come, she would have left something behind. A note. A message. Something to tell the new me what the hell was going on. I just had to figure out where she hid it. Dave was at work again, and I had the house to myself. I stood in the middle of the bedroom and tried to think like someone who was being watched. If I wanted to hide something from a man who monitored my phone and installed cameras in every room and locked doors I wasn't supposed to open, where would I put it? Somewhere he'd never look. Somewhere he'd never think to check. Somewhere so mundane and boring that it wouldn't even register as a hiding spot. My eyes landed on the dresser. Heavy wood, old-fashioned, sitting against the wall like it had been there forever. I walked over and crouched down to look underneath it. Nothing but dust and darkness. But then I noticed something. One of the floorboards near the back leg looked different from the others. Slightly raised, slightly off, like it had been pried up and put back down more than once. My heart started beating faster as I grabbed the edge of the dresser and pulled. It was heavier than I expected, but I managed to drag it a few inches away from the wall, enough to get to that floorboard. I knelt down and worked my fingers into the crack along the edge and pulled up. It came loose easier than I thought it would. And underneath it, tucked into the dark space between the floor and the foundation, was a notebook. Small, leather-bound, with a rubber band wrapped around it to keep it closed. I pulled it out and held it in my hands and just stared at it for a long moment. This was it. This was what she left behind. I opened it and a loose piece of paper fell out. It was folded in half and my name was written on the front in handwriting that matched the grocery lists on the fridge. I unfolded it and started to read. If you're reading this, something went wrong. You tried to leave and he caught you, or you got hurt. I don't know what happened, but I know you're back in this house and you don't remember why you were trying to get out. This notebook has everything. Read it from the beginning. Don't skip anything. And whatever you do, don't let Dave find it. I set the letter aside and turned to the first page of the notebook. The entries started almost 2 years ago. The early ones were short and confused, like she was still trying to convince herself that something was wrong. Dave asked to see my phone today. Not in a jealous way, he said. He just wanted to make sure I wasn't overextending myself with too many social plans. I showed him because what else was I supposed to do? He deleted 3 contacts. People from work he said I didn't need to be texting. He did it so casually, like he was cleaning out a junk drawer. Then a few weeks later, he set up a location sharing app on my phone. Said it was for safety in case something happened to me, but he checks it constantly. I went to get coffee with Becky and he called me 4 times asking why I was at a cafe when I said I was running errands. I had to send him a photo of my receipt to prove I wasn't lying. Becky looked at me like I was insane. The entries got darker as I kept going. He doesn't let me drive anymore. He says my reaction time is bad and he worries about me getting in an accident. So now he drives me everywhere. To work, to appointments, to the grocery store. I have to text him when I'm ready to be picked up, and if I'm not outside waiting when he arrives, he gets upset. He says I'm wasting his time. Then, Caroline called and he answered my phone before I could get to it. I don't know what she said, but when he hung up, he told me she's toxic, and I need to set boundaries. He wants me to stop talking to her. My own sister. He says it's for my mental health, but I think he just doesn't like that she asks questions. Then, he put a lock on the basement door and won't tell me why. Said it's storage. said I don't need to go down there. When I asked for a key, he laughed and said, "Why would you need a key to storage?" I dropped it because the way he looked at me made my stomach hurt. My hands were shaking so hard the pages started to blur. I wiped my eyes and realized I was crying. I didn't even know when I'd started. He took my debit card out of my wallet and said he's consolidating our finances for tax purposes. I asked when I'd get it back, and he said I don't need it because he buys everything I need. He gave me $40 cash and told me to make it last the month. $40. I used to make my own money. I had a savings account. I don't even know where it went. Then, I asked if I could visit my mom for her birthday, and he said no. Not, let me think about it. Not, we'll see. Just no. When I tried to argue, he grabbed my wrist and squeezed until I stopped talking. He didn't say anything. He just squeezed and looked at me until I said, "Okay, I have a bruise now." I took a photo of it. I don't know why. I just needed proof that it happened. Then, he installed cameras in the house. He says it's for security, but they're pointed at the couch where I sit, at the kitchen where I cook, at the bed where I sleep. He can watch me from his phone at work. He showed me like it was a gift, like I should be grateful he cares enough to watch. Then, he found out I created a secret email to talk to Caroline. I don't know how he found it. He monitors everything. He woke me up at 3 in the morning screaming so close to my face I could feel spit landing on my cheeks. He said if I ever went behind his back again, he'd make sure I never spoke to Caroline or anyone else ever again. I asked what that meant, and he smiled and said, "You don't want to find out." I flipped to the back of the notebook and found them. Photos. Printed out and taped to the pages. Bruises on my arms in the shape of fingerprints. A black eye with a note underneath that said, "Told everyone I walked into a door." A burn mark on my wrist with a note that said, "Punishment for coming home 20 minutes late." Evidence. She documented everything. Every hurt, every threat, every moment he made her feel small and scared and trapped. She knew no one would believe her without proof, so she collected it piece by piece and hid it under the floorboards where he'd never think to look. The last entry was dated 2 days before my accident, the same day as the visa stamp in my passport. Tonight, I'm leaving. I have a bag packed in the trunk of my car and a one-way ticket to Canada. Caroline is meeting me at the border. I'm not telling anyone else. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm just going to get in my car after Dave falls asleep and drive until I'm free. If you're reading this and I made it, this notebook doesn't matter anymore. But if you're reading this and something went wrong, if I'm hurt or trapped or back in this house with no memory of why I left, then you need to know the truth. Dave did this to me. Whatever happened, he's the reason. Get out. Trust Caroline. And whatever you do, don't let him convince you that you're crazy. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. Every sweet thing Dave had done since I woke up played through my head like a horror movie. The crying at my hospital bed, the hand-holding, the, "I'll make you fall in love with me again." It was all a lie. Every single second of it. He wasn't a loving husband helping his broken wife recover. He was a prison guard who got his prisoner back. And I'd been falling for it. My own handwriting. My own words. Warning me that the man sleeping beside me is the reason I almost died. If Dave finds out I know, there won't be a second accident. There will be a burial. I have to keep pretending. Keep smiling. Keep kissing him goodnight while planning my escape. One wrong move and I'm dead. But I've already made one wrong move. I just don't know it yet. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I had to look at Dave across the breakfast table and smile. I had to let him kiss me goodbye in the morning and welcome him home at night. I had to pretend I was still the confused little amnesiac wife who trusted him completely, while every cell in my body screamed at me to run. The notebook was back under the floorboards. I'd memorized the important parts and put everything exactly where I found it, but I couldn't unsee those photos. I couldn't unread those entries. Every time Dave touched me, I thought about the bruises. Every time he smiled, I thought about him screaming in my face at 3 in the morning. Every time he called me babe, I wanted to throw up. I was washing dishes one evening when Dave came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I forced myself not to flinch. "Hey," he said softly into my hair. "Can we talk about something?" My heart started pounding, but I kept my voice light. "Sure. What's up?" He turned me around to face him and took both my hands in his. The gesture used to feel romantic. Now it felt like handcuffs. "I've been worried about you," he said, tilting his head with that concerned expression I used to find so comforting. "You've been off lately, jumpy. Not yourself. I talked to your doctor and she thinks maybe you're not doing as good as we thought." I blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "I feel fine." I didn't feel fine. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack standing in my own kitchen. But he couldn't know that. Dave sighed and squeezed my hands. "Babe, you've been wandering around the house at weird hours. I've seen you on the cameras." My blood went cold. The cameras. Of course. He'd been watching me search. He'd seen me moving furniture and looking in closets and going through drawers. "I was just looking for things," I said quickly. "Trying to find stuff that might help me remember. Photo albums and stuff." He nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't match his sympathetic expression. I know you're trying. But the doctors said this might happen. Sometimes after a head injury, people get confused. They start thinking things that aren't real. It's not your fault. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I knew everything. I wanted to throw those photos in his face and watch him try to explain away the bruises and the burn marks. But I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anywhere to go. So I did what old Juliet would have done. I played along. Thinking things that aren't real? I said, letting my voice wobble a little. You think something's wrong with me? Dave pulled me into a hug and stroked my hair. I think you've been through a lot. And I think maybe we need to get you some more help. Somewhere you can focus on getting better. He let go of me and walked over to the counter where his work bag was sitting. He pulled out a glossy brochure and handed it to me. It was for a recovery center. The photos showed a big white building surrounded by trees and smiling people in comfortable clothes. It looked like a spa. I knew it wasn't. What is this? I asked, even though I already knew. It's a place for people like you, Dave said gently. People who've been through what you've been through. They help with memory stuff, with getting your head right. He paused. I think you should go there for a little while, just until you're feeling better. I stared at the brochure. The words blurred in front of me. He wanted to put me away, lock me in some facility where no one would believe a word I said, where he could visit me with flowers and everyone would think what a devoted husband and I would never get out. I don't think I need this, I said carefully. I feel like I'm getting better every day. Dave's jaw tightened for just a second before the soft expression returned. Babe, you've been acting weird, going through my stuff, asking strange questions. The other night you were up at 2 a.m. just standing in the hallway staring at the basement door. I had been doing that. I'd wanted to find a way to pick the lock. I hadn't realized he was watching. I was just confused, I said. I woke up and forgot where I was. It happens sometimes. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Dave said, stepping closer and cupping my face in his hands. I flinched. It was small, barely a movement, just my head jerking back half an inch before I caught myself. But it was enough. Dave's eyes changed. Not his expression. That stayed soft and concerned, but something behind them shifted, sharpened. He'd touched my face 100 times since I woke up, and I'd never once pulled away. I'd leaned into it, melted into it, trusted it, and now I'd flinched like he was about to hit me. Like I knew something I shouldn't know. I saw him clock it. I saw him file it away. He smiled softly instead. You're confused. You need help. Real help. More than I can give you here. His thumb stroked my cheeks and I wanted to pull away so bad it hurt. I already told your mom and your sister what's been going on. They think this is a good idea too. I stopped my eyes from widening. You talked to Caroline? Of course. She's your sister. She should know. His voice was so calm, so reasonable. She was upset at first, but I explained everything. The memory stuff. The way you've been acting. She gets it now. He was lying. He had to be lying. Caroline knew the truth. She'd told me to trust her. But what if he'd gotten to her? What if he'd made her think I was crazy before I could tell her what I'd found? I felt like the walls were closing in. What did she say? I managed to ask. Dave smiled sadly. She said she just wants you to get better. We all do. He kissed my forehead. I already started the paperwork. There's a hearing in 3 days. Some doctors are going to talk to you and make sure you're okay. Then we'll get you into your recovery journey. 3 days. I had 3 days before they locked me away. A hearing? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean a hearing? It's nothing scary, Dave said like he was talking to a little kid. They just want to make sure you can take care of yourself. With the memory loss and the way you've been acting, they need to check that you're okay to make your own choices. It's for your own good. For my own good. He was going to have me declared crazy. He was going to take away my right to make decisions, my right to leave, my right to tell anyone what he'd done. And he was doing it all with that same soft smile on his face. I don't want to go to some facility, I said. And this time I let the fear show in my voice because it was real. Dave, please. I'm fine. I just need more time. He pulled me into another hug and held me tight. Too tight. I know you're scared, he murmured. But this is what's best. I already filed everything. It's happening. His arms were like a cage around me. I'm doing this because I love you, Juliet. You have to trust me. I stood there in his arms and said nothing. I couldn't trust him. I would never trust him again. But he thought he'd already won. He thought I was still the confused little wife with no memory and no fight left in her. He was wrong. 3 days. I had 3 days to get out of this house. 3 days to contact Caroline. 3 days to prove I wasn't crazy before he locked me away forever. I hugged him back and rested my head on his chest and whispered, okay. And I started planning. Dave left the next morning without saying where he was going or when he'd be back. I didn't waste time. The second his car disappeared down the street, I ran to the bedroom and grabbed the duffel bag from the closet and started shoving things inside. Clothes, the notebook from under the floorboards, my passport that I'd stolen back from his lockbox 2 nights ago when he was asleep. I didn't fold anything. I didn't organize. I just threw it all in as fast as I could because I had no idea how long he'd be gone. I grabbed the burner phone I'd bought 3 days ago from a gas station when Dave let me wait in the car while he paid inside. My hands were shaking as I dialed Caroline's number. She picked up on the first ring. Juliet? What's happening? Are you okay? I'm leaving, I whispered even though no one was home. Right now. He's gone and I found everything. The notebook, the photos. I know what he did to me. Caroline exhaled hard. Thank God. I've been going crazy trying to reach you. He called me last week pretending to check in, and I knew something was wrong. Where are you going? I can meet you. I don't know yet. Just away. Anywhere. Okay, listen to me, she said, and her voice was urgent. Get out of that house and go straight to the nearest police station. I'm 40 minutes away, but I'm leaving right now. Don't stop anywhere else. Don't talk to anyone. Just go. Okay, I said. Okay, I'm going. Juliet. She paused. If something goes wrong, if you can't get out, I'm calling the cops. I don't care what he says. I'm not losing you again. I hung up and shoved the phone in my pocket and zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, headed for the front door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the handle. I took a breath, turned the lock, pulled the door open. Dave was standing on the porch. My whole body went cold. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd just left. I saw him leave, but there he was, standing 3 feet away from me with his keys in his hand and his eyes locked on the bag over my shoulder. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. I watched his face change as he put it together. The bag. The panic in my eyes. The way I was frozen in the doorway like a deer caught in headlights. He knew. He knew exactly what I was doing. Going somewhere? His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. They were dark and flat, and nothing like the soft, concerned husband I'd been living with for weeks. I took a step back without thinking. Then another. He stepped forward, and I kept backing up until I was inside the house again and he was following me in, and then the door was closing behind him. I heard the lock click. Then the deadbolt. Then the chain. Each sound made my stomach drop further. Dave. I started, but he cut me off. Don't. He held up a hand and smiled, but it wasn't the smile I was used to. It was cold. Empty. I knew you'd remember eventually. You always were stubborn. He took a step toward me and I took a step back. I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe you'd stay the sweet, grateful wife who actually appreciated everything I did for her. But no. You had to go digging. You had to find that stupid notebook. My heart stopped. You knew about the notebook? He laughed. Actually laughed. Juliet, I know about everything. The floorboards. The passport, the phone call with your sister in the middle of the night. He shook his head like I was a child who disappointed him. You really thought I wasn't watching? After everything? I was against the wall now. Nowhere left to back up. My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to speak. What did you do to me? The night of the accident. What did you do? His smile grew wider, colder. I did what I had to do. You were going to leave me, Juliet. You had a bag packed. A ticket to Canada. You thought you could just run off with your sister and I'd never find you. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. So I made sure you couldn't leave. What does that mean? My voice cracked. I didn't want to know, but I had to know. Your brakes, he said simply. I cut them. You were so focused on sneaking out that you didn't even check the car. He tilted his head like he was remembering something pleasant. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to stop you. But you had to go and crash into that tree and make everything so much more complicated. The room spun. He'd tried to kill me. The man I'd been sleeping next to for weeks. The man who held my hand in the hospital. He'd cut my brakes and watched me drive away knowing I might die. You're insane, I whispered. His face changed. The fake softness disappeared completely. I loved you. I still love you. Everything I did was because I loved you. His voice cracked, and for a second I saw something real in his eyes. Something broken. The first accident didn't kill you, but you came back perfect. Blank. Mine again. His breath was hot on my face. I'm not losing you twice. I ran. I didn't think about it. I just ran for the front door. My fingers fumbled with the chain and I got it undone and reached for the deadbolt, but then his hand was in my hair. He yanked me backwards so hard my feet left the ground. I screamed as he threw me to the floor. My shoulder hit first and pain exploded down my arm. You're not leaving, he said, standing over me. Not again. Not ever. I kicked at his legs and he stumbled. I scrambled up and ran for the kitchen, the back door. If I could just get outside, someone would see me. Someone would help. My hand closed around the doorknob and I twisted, but it wouldn't turn. Locked. I fumbled for the latch, but then he was on me again. He spun me around and slammed me against the door so hard the glass rattled. Stop fighting me, he hissed. His forearm pressed against my throat. Why do you always have to fight me? I grabbed a sharp object from the block on the counter and swung. It caught his arm and he howled and let go. Blood bloomed through his shirt sleeve. I ran again. Living room. Front door. I almost made it. My fingers touched the deadbolt. Then he tackled me from behind and we both went down. We crashed into the coffee table and it shattered beneath us. Glass everywhere. I felt it slice into my palms as I tried to push myself up. He grabbed my ankle and dragged me backward across the floor. I kicked and thrashed and my foot connected with his face. I heard a crack. Blood poured from his nose. But he didn't stop. He crawled on top of me and pinned my wrists above my head. I gave you everything, he screamed. Blood dripped from his face onto mine. I took care of you. I was there every single day while you were in that coma. And this is how you repay me? I headbutted him. Our foreheads cracked together and stars exploded in my vision. But it was worth it. He reared back and I twisted free. I crawled toward the door, but he grabbed me again. His hands found my throat. Squeezed. I couldn't breathe. Black spots danced everywhere. I clawed at his wrists, but he was too strong. Why couldn't you just stay broken? He hissed. Why couldn't you just let me love you? Then I heard it. Sirens. Faint at first, but getting louder. Dave heard them too. His grip loosened just a fraction as he turned toward the window. I reached out blindly and my hand closed around something solid. The lamp from the side table. I swung it with everything I had. It connected with the side of his head with a sound I'll never forget. He let go of my throat and crumpled sideways. And then he was on the ground and he wasn't moving. I stood over him, gasping for air with the lamp still in my hands and blood dripping from my face onto the carpet. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights flashing through the windows. Someone pounding on the door. Police! Open up! I dropped the lamp and stumbled to the door and fumbled with the locks until it swung open. 2 officers stood on the porch with their hands on their weapons. Behind them, running up the driveway with tears streaming down her face, was Caroline. Juliet. She pushed past the officers and threw her arms around me and I collapsed into her. I called them the second you hung up. I knew something was wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't speak. I just held on to my sister and cried while the officers moved past us into the house. Dave was arrested that night for attempted murder and years of documented abuse. The diary I found under the floorboards became evidence in court, and it saved my life twice. Once when I read it, and once when the jury did. My memory came back slowly over the following months. Nightmares first, then faces, then the fear I used to live in every single day. I'd wake up in the middle of the night remembering things I wished I could forget again. The way he looked at me when he was angry. The sound of his voice when he was pretending to be kind. The bruises I'd hidden under long sleeves for years. The divorce was finalized 3 months later and I moved in with Caroline.